Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us. We'll get started in just a few minutes. Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining. We'll get started in just a minute. Welcome. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Ariel, and I lead B2B marketing here at Foursquare. I'm excited to introduce you to some members of our data science and insights team to talk you through the methodologies that you need in order to understand and predict consumer behavior in 2022. This is the first of a series, so be sure to check in next month for additional tips and tricks for using location. In addition, by joining us today, you'll have access to Foursquare's Data Sci Fridays, in which our team of expert data scientists will share methodologies and best practices for using location in an online video library available on demand. New content will be added on the last Friday of each month. Now I'll hand it over to my colleagues, Ali Rossi and Emily Owaney, to kick it off for today's webinar. Thank you.
So to provide a quick overview of why we're here today, we recognize that businesses either succeed or fail based on their understanding of their consumer. So today it's more important than ever that we meet the consumer where they are. However, many businesses only understand half of their customers, and so location data can help fill those gaps and provide the whole picture. So today we'll go behind the scenes to learn more about how data scientists can derive meaningful insights about their consumers' behavior and forecast trends using location data.
Hi, everyone. So before we jump in, we just wanted to do our quick introductions. My name is Ali Rossi, and I'm a data scientist here at Foursquare, working on our first-party foot traffic panel, which I'll actually talk about in a few slides. I've actually worked with consumer source data for most of my career. And before I was a data scientist, I was a product manager here at Foursquare and also at Amazon and Nielsen, where I focused on insights products. Over to you, Emily.
Hey everyone, I'm Emily, and I'm a senior insight strategist here at Foursquare. And my role is to synthesize location data into actionable insights for brands, agencies, publishers, and platforms to enable them to uncover and capitalize on behavioral trends. So I collaborate really closely with Ali and the rest of our data science team here to brainstorm concepts that often result in new methodologies, including the ones that we'll be reviewing today. So today we're going to go behind the scenes for two unique methodologies that our team has developed within the past 2 years, starting with our foot traffic recovery rankings and ending with our affinity correlation analysis, both of which can be used to better understand consumers' real-world behavior.
So first, let's talk about Foursquare's data. We have a panel comprising millions of Americans who share their always-on location with us, which lets us derive rich insights around visitation. We capture more than 3 billion visits per month, so we're the industry's largest always-on foot traffic data set. Also, we anonymize, aggregate, and normalize our visit data to match the US Census, which lets us mitigate age, gender, and geography bias.
So now let's take a closer look at those methodologies that you can use to predict consumer behavior in 2022 and beyond. First up is our foot traffic recovery rankings. So let's talk a little bit about the purpose of this methodology. First and foremost, foot traffic recovery rankings can reveal how major events, such as the COVID-19 pandemic, could impact foot traffic to various places and inform planning strategies. It can also be used to assess impact of other macroeconomic events on certain industries. So for example, we could apply this methodology to take a closer look at how challenges with agricultural production are currently impacting certain grocery store chains, or how challenges with overseas manufacturing impacting US ports are currently also impacting various categories within the retail industry. And then lastly, it can identify relative comparisons over time by category, by chain, and by geography in a way that's more apples to apples in order to make well-informed predictions.
So I'm going to dive into the methodology that we use for these recovery rankings. So what we want to obtain at the end is a ranked list predicting who's going to recover first from a major event that affected visitation. So first we have to define, what we want to rank. In this case, we want to rank chains within the clothing store category to understand their relative rates of recovery from the COVID-19 pandemic. We start out by aggregating weekly foot traffic data by chain for the year of the event. So in this case, 2020, to look at decline and recovery rates related to the beginning of the pandemic. So to understand relative changes, we take that data and index it to the first week of the data set. Then to seasonally adjust according to natural visit patterns for the year before, we calculate an index change by subtracting 2019 data from 2020. So you can see here, the chart on the slide shows the weekly index change for 2020 versus 2019 for one blinded clothing store chain. We also need to define the event date, which is the major event that we believe impacts visitation. So in the case of the COVID-19 pandemic, we use March 1st, 2020 for simplicity. Next, we need to identify the decline period versus the recovery period, which are marked on the chart. And each of those are specific to a given chain. So the decline period starts when the index change reaches the 10th percentile of the pre-event period for more than 1 week. The threshold is set at the 10th percentile to identify large declines, but could also be customized if you want to be more sensitive to smaller disruptions. But in this case, for COVID-19, we thought 10th percentile was a good threshold. We then set the bottom of the decline just simply to be the minimum index change after the start of this decline period, with the recovery period following right after. So from this, to get to our insights, we need a few different things. We need to get the lowest relative decline for each change. So that's the index change at the bottoming out point that I just talked about. You can see on the chart. We're going to use this to bucket the chains by their relative declines later. We also need to get the slope and the intercept for each chain's latest 5 weeks of recovery. So this is going to be used to bucket the chains by their rate of recovery and also rank them by an estimated time to recovery. So as you can see on this chart, we can actually predict the length of time to full recovery using the recovery slope and intercept. You can see that line of best fit in kind of the teal line on the chart. And in this case, we define the full recovery that you see at the top right as when the index change reaches the 25th percentile of the pre-event period. So again, 25th percentile, you can customize that to your needs. So for this clothing chain, we see an estimated time to full recovery of about 2.5 weeks. Next slide, please. So now to get at our insights, we create a relative ranking of the chains by that estimated time to full recovery that we just talked about. So in the case of our blinded chain, 2.5 weeks. We can also bucket the recovery slopes and relative declines into high, medium, and low buckets so we can understand the relative strength of the decline and recovery for each chain. You can see on the chart there. So in this example, we talked about ranking chains within a category, but we've also used this methodology to rank markets or DMAs for one specific given chain or category to understand where recovery is happening more or less quickly. Next slide, please.
So as we touched on earlier, this methodology was particularly useful in uncovering impact and anticipated rate of recovery for various retailers at the onset of the pandemic in early 2020. So in this first example that we're looking at, our foot traffic recovery rankings revealed the top 16 retail categories that we expected to recover most quickly based on the relative decline and the rate of recovery, as Ali explained. So now looking back over the past 2 years, we can confirm that many of our initial category projections proved to be true. For example, we initially projected that discount stores like Dollar General or Family Dollar would be relatively quick to bounce back. This proved to be true largely due to the fact that discount stores were deemed essential retail and therefore remained open throughout the early months of the pandemic, while a lot of other retailers were still closed. We also suspect that in a time of great uncertainty, many retailers or many Americans sought deals and discounts on everyday necessities. This trend remains especially relevant today amidst rising inflation, with surging food prices turning many shoppers into bargain hunters. As a result of COVID, daily routines quickly shifted, which impacted consumer behavior and preference. So our recovery rankings provided a really great early indication of these changes. For example, people were spending significantly more time outside in order to maintain social distance. And as gyms remained closed, many Americans pivoted to at-home workout routines. Our rankings indicated early on that outdoor supply and sporting goods stores were primed for quicker recovery relative to other specialty retailers. This projection proved to be true as we continued to monitor foot traffic trends to various retail categories throughout the pandemic. And we saw that traffic to these stores, as well as parks and hiking trails, remained noticeably elevated since the outbreak occurred. Similarly, with more professionals working remotely, in-store foot traffic to home, furniture, and office supply retailers was also quick to bounce back, as predicted by our rankings. However, we saw that toys, games, and electronics retailers ranked toward the bottom. We could infer that this is largely due to the fact that many retailers remained closed in the early months of 2020. It's also become evident that consumers were making fewer trips out of the home and therefore being more selective about where they chose to shop, resulting in a lasting preference for large format retailers like big box and warehouse, where they could complete their one-stop shopping all in one place. We could also hypothesize that consumers were more likely to shop for certain items like shoes in stores, while other items like toys, games, and electronics, which are relatively easier to purchase online. If we take a closer look at recovery rankings by chain, our data revealed, on the next slide, our data revealed that popular shoe retailers such as DSW, Famous Footwear, were in fact projected to recover most quickly based on the rate of relative decline in visits, as well as the relative rate of recovery since that initial outbreak, further supporting our hypothesis that around in-store traffic versus shopping online. We also saw that several off-price and thrift retailers, so places like Burlington, Goodwill, and Kohl's, ranked toward the top of our list, further indication that shoppers were seeking discounts and switching to lower cost store brands as a result of the pandemic. So to recap, there are a variety of ways in which we can use this exact methodology to predict consumer behavior. The first of which is competitive benchmarking and market intelligence. For instance, you can use recovery rankings to project which categories or chains are primed for speedy recovery and which ones are more likely to lag behind compared to their competitors. This is especially relevant today amidst the ongoing pandemic and could be useful for other macroeconomics, including supply chain disruption. Second, this could be helpful to guide local advertising investments, such as adjusting media spend in certain markets based on projected recovery. And lastly, these rankings could be used to inform real estate investment strategy by way of trade area analysis. So for instance, if these rankings reveal that traffic to mattress stores is projected to pick up more quickly than carpet stores, you could leverage these learnings to adjust negotiating power between tenants. Next, we'll take a closer look at our affinity correlation analysis. So let's unpack why this matters. Correlations in users' visitation levels to certain categories and chains can help brands and marketers understand customers' personal interests and real-world behavior. Furthermore, analyzing changes in these correlations over time can expose how certain events, such as the pandemic, have disrupted consumers' usual routines and behaviors. For instance, we could use this methodology to answer questions like, where are people more likely to go as a result of the pandemic, and where are they less likely to go? These learnings can also reveal opportunities to influence brand partnerships and rewards programs, and can also be used to build relevant messaging to reach new opportunity audiences.
So how does it work? What we want to get at the end is which categories became more correlated and which ones less so over a certain period. So first, we're going to have to define our pre and post periods for which we want to compare category correlations. So I've kept each period to 3 weeks in length. I felt like that's kind of long enough to include a breadth of different category visits for users, but it's also short enough to sort of capture a moment in time of consumers' routines. So for each period, we calculate the number of visits to each category by each user, and then standardize that by dividing by each user's number of active days in the panel. From there, we're going to calculate Pearson's correlation coefficients for each combination of two categories for each of our periods. And then we're going to determine significance between each period's correlation coefficients by obtaining Fisher's z-value. Next slide, please. So now we have the pre-period correlation, the post-period correlation, and our z-values for each combination of categories. We feel that there's value in looking at the relative magnitude of correlation. So we sorted based on pre-period correlation, and we picked out the highest examples. We then filtered out those that had the z-values less than 1.96 to remove the insignificant examples. And then to derive meaning, what we looked at was the direction of change of the correlation coefficients. So we want to identify which categories increase in affinity during the post period and which ones decrease to tell us something about changes to consumers' routines and affinities. Next slide, please.
So as we touched on before, correlations can help brands and marketers understand changes in those category correlations over time. So in this particular example, our data revealed that an increased correlation between pet stores and home improvement retailers like hardware stores or garden centers. This increased correlation is indicative of a shift in daily routines and consumer behavior that was brought on by the pandemic. And looking back, the fact that we saw this increased correlation between these two categories seems rather intuitive. For example, we know that pet adoption was on the rise in the early months of 2020 as more people were spending time at home. And so these new and existing pet owners were therefore more inclined to take up home improvement projects to improve their own living space for themselves and for their pets. In contrast, we can look at location data through negative correlations. So we see a decreased correlation between pet stores and certain other non-essential retail categories since the outbreak occurred. So while pet owners were still visiting pet stores in person, which were deemed essential retail categories, these consumers were generally less inclined to shop for other non-essentials, such as clothing, in stores. So similar to the trends revealed by our recovery rankings, location data also verified that consumers were in fact being more selective about the number of shopping trips they were making, and perhaps more inclined to shop for certain items like clothing online versus in stores, thus resulting in a decreased correlation between these two categories attributed to the pandemic. In both cases, we notice an obvious shift in pre-pandemic behavior from which brands and marketers can capitalize on. First, one important use case for this methodology is quantitative investing. So from these insights, we can make predictions and correlations between visits and chains versus categories at large. So for example, if you're starting to see traffic go up to independent coffee shops, you might think that traffic to a global chain like Starbucks might suffer and choose to not invest. The insights could also be useful for demand planning and supply chain operations. So in the example we looked at today, big box stores could capitalize on these learnings and increase stock of pet supplies in stores. Brands can also consider new partnerships or rewards programs based on increased correlation with a particular brand to reach the right opportunity audience. And lastly, these insights could help retailers optimize store layouts or product placement. So for example, our analysis revealed a stronger correlation between pet stores and hardware stores. So retailers such as Lowe's or the Home Depot could capitalize on these learnings by moving pet-related products near the front of the store. So in conclusion, these methodologies represent just two of many ways in which you can leverage location data to analyze, activate, and measure impact. Now more than ever, location data is crucial, offering that layer of intelligence that change the way businesses think about how they approach data and how brands can fully understand their consumer behavior. Real-world visits inform how to keep customers engaged and loyal. Both of the methodologies we reviewed today are using Foursquare Visits, which is the only MRC accredited visit solution and is coupled with our first-party data and trusted third-party partnerships. To summarize some of the key use cases we highlighted today, visits data can be leveraged to analyze consumer movement, predict trends, determine optimal sites for new locations, and derive powerful insights. And this concludes our first behind-the-scenes look with Foursquare Insights and Analytics, and we hope to see you in the next one.
Thanks so much, Emily and Allie. That was really awesome to see this behind-the-scenes look at these methodologies and everything that our data science team is working on. So with that, we will take a few questions from the audience. Let's see, the first question that I'm seeing is what tools do you use at Foursquare for data science? What does your data science team use in terms of tools? So I think that one's probably best for Allie to take.
Yeah, sounds good. So there are a few different data science teams at Foursquare. So I'm on the data science analytics team working on these types of insights. And so our team's tool base, we do most of our coding in Python. We use PySpark for big data. There's some SQL on the team as well, but all of these were written in PySpark. And we generally work in Databricks notebooks for these types of more, project-based ad hoc analyses. We also, for kind of bigger projects, we run Amazon EMR clusters. And we can also use Zeppelin, which is another notebooking tool for sometimes when I'm trying to run some really big things. But generally, I'm mainly in Python and PySpark in Databricks notebooks working on these types of analyses.
Excellent, thank you. I think it's always helpful to hear sort of what tools you're using on the inside with location. Let's see, the next question that we can look at is where does Foursquare get its data from? I know we covered that a bit at the beginning, but maybe Emily could give a little bit more detail on that.
Yeah, that's a great question. So to power our solutions, including our insights, Foursquare has a panel of several data sources, which includes users of our owned and operated apps, so things like City Guide and Swarm and Rewards, as well as users of other apps that leverage our location tools, and then thirdly, carefully vetted suppliers. So our geocontextual awareness technology is only leveraged when it's genuinely useful to a consumer and their location to be collected. So there's a clear value exchange in return for sharing your data or sharing your location. So you won't always see that technology collecting location unbeknownst to a consumer. So for example, in a flashlight app, but there is always a clear, transparent user benefit to sharing your location with us.
Excellent. Thank you. Next question is, how do you account for bias within your panel?
I can take that one. So I mentioned it very briefly on the data sources slide when I talked about normalization, but to give you a little more on that. So we look at state, age, and gender to kind of create a weighting for each user in our panel. And we compare that to US Census data to get that weighting. We then apply each user's weighted score to each visit so we can adjust our analyses to be reflective of real world trends.
Got it. Got it. That's helpful. Thank you, Allie. The next question is, how granular can these analyses get in terms of geography?
I can take that. So we conduct feasibility checks for any analysis that we run in order to ensure adequate sample size and statistical significance. So our team typically focuses on analyses by region or by DMA, but it's certainly possible to get much more granular as our data goes down to the venue level.
Excellent. Let's see. The next question is, how do we educate customers to do their own analyses? So perhaps one of you could speak to sort of how you're working with customers to conduct these analyses.
Yeah, I can take that. So in many cases, we provide custom analyses for our customers. So we'll try to understand what their goals are, what they're trying to accomplish by doing a custom insights analysis. And so oftentimes for clients who are interested in receiving an ongoing visit feed, we'll educate them on the various ways in which they can replicate those analyses themselves once they start receiving that data.
I previously served as the director of our enterprise customer success team, and so I can also speak to that in our working with our customers who leverage visit data, we would often pull in an expert from our team like Allie to have conversations with them and look at how they were running an analysis, and we would then replicate that analysis ourselves internally and compare and make sure that the methodologies were accurate and understand what the discrepancy was between the two analyses to identify perhaps why a customer might be finding a different result or learning from that than what we were seeing internally, and then sort of troubleshoot that way. So that's something that we do day in and day out with our partners who license our visits, is really provide that hands-on white glove service to you, where we're not only working with your BD team, but also working with your data scientists who have their hands on the data to get in the weeds with you and make sure that you're getting that value and answering the questions that you're looking to answer. Let's see. If Foursquare collaborates with any other institutes out there on aggregating and analyzing foot traffic data, what are some of the knowledge translation activities Foursquare engages in with the insights and analytics obtained? So I can jump in on this quickly and then see if Allie or Emily has anything to add. But I think that our solutions are being used to help derive insights in a number of different areas, as Emily alluded to, right? So we're helping to partner with advertisers and advertising agencies and publishers to derive insights about visitation based on exposure to different advertisements in a dashboard platform. So that's one way in which our data is then being used by various different institutions to make decisions. We also are licensing our data to a variety of different companies to make decisions. So, quantitative investing. So we'll have hedge funds using our data to make their decisions. We collaborate with professional services organizations, consultancies to help guide data-driven decisions on behalf of their clients. So I hope that addresses the question. But I think, we partner in a variety of different ways, all the way up from the custom research that Emily's team does to deliver sort of packaged up PDF reports with analyses and takeaways, all the way down to licensing the actual visitation data itself, and then working, introducing Ali's team to the data scientists that are using that data to help enable them to derive their own insights. So sort of a spectrum of relationships with our customers, from the most managed service to the most self-service.
I'm going to jump in too. That was great, Ariel. Just to give a plug for part 2 of the webinar, we're going to talk about a few different partnerships we had with different partners and publishers where we joined together our data sources and did some really cool analyses. For example, combining weather and visitation data. So definitely check out part 2 in February to see how we did that.
All right. I think the last question, because we're just about out of time, was how is machine learning used for consumer behavior prediction, and do we have any examples of that?
Yeah, so definitely there's several data science teams that use ML as a core of the product that they work on. So for example, we have a model called the PlaceSnap model, which utilizes KNN and XGBoost. And what that actually does is when we get visits in from our visitation panel, the signals kind of come from mobile phones. So we get latitude, longitude, Wi-Fi networks, time of day, all these different signals. And the PlaceSnap model actually will convert that into a list of potential venues by probability that that person is at, just based on the mobile phone signals. And Foursquare's rich POI and knowledge of location. So that's a super cool model. Our measurements product is a causal inference model. I don't work on that as much, so I can't talk as deeply about that. But basically, every area of our company has some really cool ML going on. Also with our POI data, given that we have billions of places across the world, we utilize different ML techniques to determine when places may have closed, to derive different metadata for places. So it's definitely embedded in all of the teams here at Foursquare that work on data science.
Thank you, Ali. Let's see. 2 final questions I think we may have time to answer is, how can we get some of the papers that we're publishing and share it with customers? We would definitely be happy to engage with anyone who is writing papers and doing research with Foursquare data and to publicize that more broadly. So definitely feel free to contact us by visiting foursquare.com and get in touch, and we can have a conversation. And the last question is, how do we sign up for part 2 of the webinar? So you'll be receiving an email follow-up after joining us today, and we'll definitely make sure that you're on the list to join us for more great insights and methodologies from Ali and Emily and the rest of our data science team. And I'll do one last plug for Data Sci Fridays. So also by joining us today, you'll receive access to an online video library with really behind the scenes footage of our data science team talking about different methodologies that they've developed, and a really great look at what we work on here at Foursquare. So thank you all for joining us today, and we hope to see you next time.